Hey guys, it's Amy with Above and I'm coming to you today with another Have You Got a Minute? The questions that we get asked when someone taps us on the shoulder, sends us a text, emails us, and says, have you got a minute to talk? And today's question is, how do I listen to feedback without getting so upset? And I think there are, two categories of people, a lot more categories, but as it pertains to this question, there's one set of people who can't understand this question at all because they were blessed to grow up and learn a growth mindset or whatever it might be, and they are very able to take in feedback, listen to it, respond to it, process it, whatever they need to do without having a lot of emotions around it. And then there's the other group of people that I think from time to time we can all fall into, and this is the group of people who really get scared to have any sort of feedback conversation, to sit down with their boss with a piece of paper in front of them, if it's the annual performance appraisal, the development plan, whatever that might be, because they're terrified not only of what they'll hear, but how they'll respond to it. And this was me, so I'm really excited to talk to you about it today. There were a number of times that I remember now, not so fondly, where I went into my boss's office. She gave me a piece of feedback that, when I look at it now, is actually quite minor. But at the time, it was so upsetting to me that I would actually choke up and be unable to speak without crying. And in this particular set of instances, the boss was someone who I knew really cared about me as well, so it was a safe place to do that. But a lot of us don't have that safe space or that supportive person to help us work through those emotions. So if this is you, and pretty sure if this is you because you've had the experience, I've got a few tips for you. The first one is, know that no matter what the feedback is, just because you've made a mistake, upset someone, done something quote unquote wrong, does not make you a mistake. You aren't the person who always does things wrong. You're not a bad person. Know that the instance and who you are, your self-worth, are two different things. For me, I always struggle with that because I was running around trying really, really hard, not only to do a good job, but to make sure everyone liked me, to tick all the boxes. And so I would be crushed when I got a small piece of feedback because it felt like the entire house of cards that I had built was just completely collapsing. So know that one instance, one set of feedback does not mean that you as a person are that entire feedback. Your whole person is that feedback. So that's number one. Number two is always validate feedback that you're given. And the first step in doing that is to talk to the person, whether it's your manager or a peer or whoever, and try to stay present enough to get specific examples. There's so many times where I have had someone come to me and they've been really upset about a piece of feedback, and when I ask them to tell me more, they actually can't because while they were becoming so upset, they forgot to ask about the specific instances and the behaviors that they had done. So that is really challenging to not get upset about because you take away a much broader picture of what's wrong with you than in this meeting, you did this particular thing, you said this particular thing, or within this plan that you've made, I see these errors, or there's this conflict that's happening and your role in it is this, and I've witnessed you doing this behavior to cause it. Those are very different things. So always ask for examples. If you've done that, the other thing that can happen is that you will get feedback from people and they will claim that is not their feedback. They will say, lots of people have told me this, or there's a general idea that you've got this problem. And I'm not saying that when that comes out, they're always wrong. But what you need to do is go find either the people that were mentioned, if the person tells you who those people are, or identify a few other people who you trust, but also know will give you honest perspective, and ask them if their experience of you aligns with that feedback that you've been given. What you may find is that the feedback is completely valid, and then you get to move on to the next step. However, you may also find, and I think this happens 50% of the time actually, that the person who gave you the feedback misrepresented it or misunderstood how intense it was for the people who might have been sharing it with them. Or it might have been based on a singular experience or a general feeling and is not based in reality whatsoever. Or other people may just validate for you that in general, the experience of you is not that. So it's a very small, specific thing that you need to work on. And that can be an incredible relief for most of us to realize that something we thought was a massive problem is much smaller, much more manageable, and we can start to take action against it. So that's the second step. Now, the third step is if you validate that feedback and you find that it is true according to the people that you have asked, true because perception is their reality, you still get to decide whether the feedback resonates with you and whether you want to do anything about it. And this is incredibly empowering, I think, for most of us, because a lot of times we grew up in this, academic culture where you're just trying to get the right marks, and that feedback is really meaningful because someone has the end all, be all, say all about the value of the work that you do. Then you move into this work environment and you want to do well, and you're told that you need to listen to the feedback. So you kind of think that these authority figures around you can tell you more about everything in the working world than you probably know. But the reality is that you are the only expert on yourself. And if someone gives you feedback and it resonates, or you've gotten it repeatedly, you may want to choose to do something about that. But if someone gives you feedback and you're like, you know what, I've never heard that before, that is totally not aligned with what I'm trying to do, who I want to be as a person, my value system, and the people that I'm close to that are around me have never said anything like that, then that feedback is probably not you. It's probably the other person's experience and all of the stuff that they carry around with them that they're now projecting onto you. So you get to set that aside. You don't have to do anything about it if you don't want to. So those are my 3 steps to finding a way to not get so upset when you are listening to feedback. One is to remember that just because you might be told something critical or constructive does not mean that you are a bad person or that you are not a person who does things well. Always, always, always validate feedback if it's really upsetting to you and if it's unclear in the first place. And 3, take what resonates and leave the rest. You're the ultimate person who gets to decide who you become, who you want to become, and what is meaningful to you. Now, if all those 3 steps are still difficult for you and you find yourself like I did, where you've got a lot of emotion bubbling up and you can't even stay present and aware enough to ask for the examples, then I really encourage you to do some work looking at what are those triggers for you and why is this happening. So in my case, there are just different things in experiences that I've had over the course of my life, in my childhood, how my parents were, love them to death, but every function or every family is dysfunctional in its own way, that were causing me to have that sort of response. So I actually worked with a therapist, which I found super helpful and very freeing. Coaches can also help you with this. Or there are great tools out there. One we used to use at Yum, the company I used to be with, it's called Heart Styles. I will pop a link for you down below. And it basically is a system for collecting sort of 360 feedback and then a model for understanding why those things trigger for you and how to start to get a sense of awareness of them and then be able to own and control your response. So I hope that this is helpful for you and that the next time that you are in a feedback situation, you manage to hold it together if that is your goal, and also hear the feedback and make your own decisions about it. If you have any questions or you want to do some work with this, just pop over to our website, shoot us an email, you can sign up for coaching, or follow us on the socials for more inspiration and support. Thank you so much for listening, and best of luck with your next feedback session.